Think about the last time you were asked to produce a data visualization or infographic to communicate a message to a particular group of people. I bet you spent a lot of time and effort to get something you were happy with. But do you understand how the visualization worked effectively? It's likely that you were applying some design principles which, although common sense, if you're aware of them and understand how they work, will allow you to produce great work time after time. These principles form part of Gestalt psychology, a theory that emphasizes the processing of patterns and configurations rather than individual components. The word Gestalt means unified whole, and Gestalt psychology is based on the theory of holism, which is often summarized as the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, or more accurately, the whole is different to the sum of its parts. What this means in terms of data visualization is that people will try and interpret any visualization as a whole before they even see the details that it contains. The first principle is proximity, whereby objects near each other will be perceived to belong together. Take, for example, a column chart with two groups of data on it. Add some space between the groups so that even before the viewer has seen the subtitles, they'll know that they're dealing with two sets of data. Next we have similarity, whereby objects with similar shapes, sizes or colours will be perceived to belong together. Going back to our column chart example, if you've got subsets within each group that are common across the two groups, then you could use colour to identify that these subsets belong together. The similarity principle is useful for tables of data where a heat map colour effect can be used to group related items. If you're working on a project that has multiple visualizations displayed together, such as a dashboard, make sure that the similarity principle is applied consistently. For example, if you've created a chart that has revenue displayed in green, make sure that all your other revenue charts use green as well. Enclosure is a strong design principle with data visualization because, unlike proximity where only space is used to indicate relationships, with enclosure a visual boundary is drawn around items to indicate that they belong together. A good example of this in data visualization is matrix diagrams, and here you can see the Boston Consulting Group's growth share matrix, where the boundaries clearly indicate which segment products belong to. Closely related to enclosure is the closure principle, where objects will appear whole even if they're not graphically complete. An example of this is with charts that have two axes, which will be viewed as a discrete bounded object. If you use this with multiple visualizations, make sure you give each visualization enough space for the closure principle to work. In its simplest form, the figure ground principle states that the largest area of any image will be considered the background. Here we have two identical images that have different parts shaded to the blue background colour. So the object on the left appears as two faces, and the object on the right appears as a vase. But if we change the background colour, those images switch places. This is a very useful concept in design. Think about the hidden arrow in the FedEx logo, but can be quite confusing for data visualizations. To demonstrate, take this very simple chart as an example. Now, in the real world, it would have data labels and markers to aid understanding. But remember, the fundamental of Gestalt psychology is that people will view objects in their entirety before looking at the detail. So we're looking to avoid any misunderstanding before people go and look at data labels and such like. In its current state, we can't tell if this chart is horizontal bars or vertical columns. So to aid understanding, the background part of the chart should be a very subtle background color, ideally the same background color as the rest of the visualization. And to just separate out the data items a little bit, put a narrow border around them to give them a bit of space, again in the background color. The continuation principle states that our eyes will look at an object and follow its intended path. So on this chart here, you can see we've got an upward sloping diagonal line and a vertical line. But what if that's not the case? What if the two sets of data actually look like this? Here I've shaded the data points to add some additional context to the chart, but it may not be enough to override the continuation principle. If I can't present the data another way, I may consider separating the lines using the proximity principle, bounding them using enclosure, or joining them up using our next principle, connection. While not as powerful as enclosure, visual connections send a strong message that items are related. You'll see it used to great effect in infographics where related items can be strewn across a page or screen, and in data visualizations such as dumbbell and line charts. If your visualization includes snapshots of data with a moving variable such as time, and is therefore presented as an animation or a series of charts, then bear in mind the common fate principle, whereby an audience may infer patterns based on the way that data points are moving. If this movement is intentional and part of the story that you're trying to tell, then all well and good. If it's not, or the movement is purely coincidental, then bring it to the attention of your audience straight away to avoid any confusion. Like I said earlier on, a lot of this is common sense and interpreted subconsciously by our brains. But if you have an understanding of these Gestalt psychology principles, you'll be able to avoid confusion and ensure that your audience get quick, meaningful, and useful insights from your visualizations. Thanks for watching. Please like the video if you found this useful and consider subscribing to get notified when new content is released.